In this video, we're going to learn a very easy skill. Should SHTF happen, this is an easy skill that you can learn to make something that you could barter with among trusted people, or it could also just serve as a real morale booster and pick-me-up. Right after the channel intro. Remember, you are ultimately responsible for protecting yourself and for providing for yourself. Live your life with honor and integrity, and always be the wolf hunter. Don't be the sheep, and never be the wolf. Folks, since YouTube isn't always showing you when channels that you have subscribed to have released a new video, please hit the little bell icon so you are notified anytime that I release one. Now, making this is so easy, and for how easy it is and for how valuable it is after it's made, this is one of those skills that any prepper would be crazy not to learn how to do, at least I think. So today we're going to see how easy it is to make maple syrup from a maple tree and how you can turn the sap from a maple tree into liquid gold. Now, real maple syrup is pricey enough in good times, and this is something I think will be almost worth its weight in gold should SHTF happen. So maple syrup is made from boiling down the sap from a maple tree. That's it. You don't add any food coloring or any sugar to it. When the tree sap boils down, it naturally boils down from the watery and clear tree sap into a darker colored sweet syrup. And it takes a lot of sap to make an actual bottle of syrup. It actually boils down 40 parts to 1, meaning that if you started out with 40 gallons of sap, that you'll end up with 1 gallon of actual syrup. And I found that on a good year, I'll get about 10 gallons of sap from one tree, meaning that I'll get about 4 pints of syrup from one tree. The best time to tap your maple tree is in real early spring or late winter. You want the temperatures to be in the mid-30s during the day and below freezing at night. And just for a tip, the milder the winter that you've had, then the earlier that you're going to want to tap your trees. This year I actually started my taps in early February, and the sap had pretty much stopped running just a week or 2 weeks later. And I believe that the major sap producers actually started their taps in January this year because of how mild the winter was. Now, you don't want to tap your trees during the warmer months. You'll get little to no sap, and I've heard it will end up bitter tasting. But from my understanding, the freezing and the thawing is what really kicks the sap movement in the tree into high gear. And from what I've learned, when the tree develops its buds is when it's time for you to remove your taps. First thing that you're going to need is obviously a maple tree. Now, I don't know how to tell the different maple trees out there, and I think I have a silver maple. But the easiest way that I know of to identify a maple tree is that in the spring, they drop their winged seeds that we always called helicopters as kids. And you can also tap other types of trees, such as birch trees and sycamore trees. But I have a maple tree, and I've heard that maple is the most popular to tap because you get more syrup per sap ratio. But along with the maple tree, you're also going to need a drill that's either manual or electric, a 5/16 drill bit, at least that's the size that I needed for the taps that I have. And you're going to be drilling about 1 inch into the tree, so it's a good idea to use a marker to mark your drill bit at the 1 inch mark so you'll know when to stop drilling. You're also going to need a bucket, and one that's food grade is probably a good idea. And you're also going to need a lid for that bucket to keep leaves and dirt and bird droppings out of the sap as you collect it. And in that lid, you're going to drill holes just large enough to run the tap lines down into it. And you're also going to need the actual taps and their lines that you're actually going to tap into the tree once you've drilled the holes for them. Now, these plastic taps that I have pictured here have worked fine for me since you only tap them into the pre-drilled holes. You don't actually pound them in. And there's many other types of taps and buckets and kits out there, and some of them can get expensive. But these plastic tips that I bought off either Amazon or eBay have worked fine for me. And this cheap kit actually worked better than a $100 stainless steel kit that I bought a couple months back. And then lastly, you're going to need a hammer or some other blunt force object to tap the taps into the tree. Now, from what I've read, the southeast side of the maple tree will produce the most sap. You'll also want to drill into a slightly upwards angle so gravity will help the sap flow down into the tap. And in a large and mature maple tree like this, you should be able to get at least 3 taps. And in smaller trees, you want to have fewer taps. Again, you're going to want to drill about 1 inch deep into the tree. And this is where having your drill bit marked at the right depth so you'll know when to stop will come in handy. And you don't have to worry about the drill holes at the end of the maple sugaring season. They'll heal on their own, and I'll put a picture of an old tap hole in this video. Now you want to insert the taps, that are actually called spiles, into the drilled holes and tap them in. Again, you don't actually have to hammer them in or hit them hard, you just simply tap them. But once you tap your tree, you should start to see the sap to start slowly dripping out of the lines. And hopefully this camera has been able to pick up the sap starting to slowly drip. Now you put your bucket into place, and then you place your lid on top of the bucket to keep the bird droppings and other foreign objects out. And then you feed your tap lines into the lid of the bucket so that the sap makes it into the bucket for collection later on. Depending on how fast the sap is running will dictate how often you'll have to harvest the sap to boil it down. But you'll want to check it at least once a day, and when the weather is perfect for sap production, I've gotten about 3/4 of a bucket in one day, at least out of my tree. And when the tree starts getting real buds again is when you'll want to remove your taps and call it quits for the season. Plus, it's been my experience that the sap will pretty much quit dripping out anyways. Now every time I fill up a 5-gallon bucket with sap, I go ahead and boil it down because I can usually get 1 or 2 pints out of that one bucket. And even though I do use a lid on my bucket, you will still end up with little bits of nature in your sap, so I just pour it into a second bucket using a clean towel to strain it. Now you'll notice that the sap in the bucket will look and taste pretty much like water, but that's normal and it will boil down to the sweet syrup once you introduce it to heat. Now you can boil this down either inside or outside of your house, but I'm choosing to do it over the open fire this time just because I want to practice for grid down. And a larger pot would also be ideal, but this is the largest pot that I have that can cook over an open fire pit, so I'm making do with what I have. Now what you're going to do when you boil it, as the water heats and begins steaming, the water evaporates away and it slowly grows thicker and the sweet syrup is left behind. And I don't know if you're able to see the steam coming off of this or not from all the smoke from the fire pit. Now what you're wanting to do is to get your sap to an even boil. You don't want to risk cooking it too fast or risk burning it. And be prepared for this to take several hours. This is not a quick process. And next year I think I'm going to try building a rocket stove to do this. It was so windy today, it took a while to get it boiling because the wind was blowing much of the heat away from underneath it. And the more the sap boils down, and the more that the sap steams away, you'll notice that it's going from looking like plain water to getting more of a darker color. And hopefully this video is letting you see how it's a little darker than when it first started out. Now since I'm using a smaller pot, I can't boil the whole 5-gallon bucket down all at once. So as the first pot gets close to boiling completely down, I'll just add more sap from the bucket, and I'll keep doing this until the whole bucket eventually boils away. Now when you get close to being done and you're seeing that you're getting close, this is where you really have to keep an eye on it and make sure that you don't burn it, because when it hits that just right spot, it can go from not quite finished to burnt really quickly. So what I do is when it gets close to being done, I either lower the heat by moving the burning coals around, or I just bring it inside to my stove where I can control the heat a little bit better. But for the sake of this video and for the sake of making this off-grid, I'm just going to finish this outside over the open fire pit. Now just know that it's almost through trial and error that you'll learn when it's done or not. Just keep a close eye on it, especially when it's getting close to being done. And also know that once it cools down, it will grow a little bit more syrupy and thicker. But once it gets that nice dark color to it, then give it a taste test. And if it looks like hot syrup and it tastes like hot syrup, then it's probably done. Once it cools down enough for me to pour into a jar, I just like to use a rubber band to secure a clean wash rag over the top of the funnel. This allows me to filter out any ash that may have gotten into the syrup as it was cooking. And as you can see here, I got into a hurry and overfilled the jar and I lost a little bit. And this year we would have gotten 2 full pints had I not spilled that. But nonetheless, once it cooled down, this homemade maple syrup tastes better. At least I think, better than anything that you could buy off the store shelf. So there you go, folks. Step-by-step directions on how you can easily make something that I think will be highly sought after if SHTF happens. Folks, if you like this video, please support my channel by giving it the thumbs up, and please comment below with your thoughts, and please share this video by clicking on the icon, and if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to this channel as many more videos on prepping and self-defense are coming. Find me on Facebook under Ethical Preparedness page. Just use the terms Ethical Preparedness page in Facebook search box. Anyways, folks, if you made it this far, thank you very much for watching, and I pray that you have a good night.